Well, in case you don't know, the next EU4 patch 1.34 seems to be around the Baltic region, Northern Europe, that area. And there have been two dev diaries so far on it, so I want to loosely talk about it. I'm not going to actually read you through the details, this isn't a storybook. So I will link the dev diaries and I hope you can read it if you want to ever look at things in detail. So I'm mostly going to focus on the actual changes instead of the background or like the fluff that they add. Like there's some Napoleon quote that I personally don't care about. So the first thing they're showing off seems to be the Teutonic Missions. And, well, they seem to really like this concept of a branching mission that they pioneered on 1.33. I think branching missions are pretty cool, but I think the way it's done is somewhat hacky, I suppose. It's sort of it reeks to me of like a modder using like a clever trick, essentially, instead of the UI properly accounting for the branching aspect. So I don't know how much of this is placeholder, right? Like maybe they'll figure out a better way to present this, but when I immediately get hit with a mission tree that looks like this, I get lost. It's hard for me to plan because in EU4, you open your country, you open your missions, and then you hover over like the future missions, and you're like, oh, I have to do this. Oh, but to do this, I have to do this. And you can't really see that with the branching missions. I think Imperator Rome handled branching missions better. The branches actually showed up in the tree, and once you hover over a particular branch, the other branch would actually like collapse or like essentially have an animation where it disappears. Just to highlight that if you pick one, you can't pick the other. So that's sort of like the idea of branching, right? But you can actually like see through the future branch, hover over it, look at the tooltips, and see what sort of things to expect. You can't really do that with this style, and I really think this is like a UI issue or shortcoming of the mission tree, like the mission UI. So it's certainly sort of disappointing, I guess, that at least on first glance there doesn't seem to be like game improvements to the UI experience with respect to branching missions, and instead they're sort of like hacking it up with these sorts of place order things, and then I'll show you later, but internally it's basically like a mission update. Okay, but let me ignore the qualms of this presentation. I think branching missions, at least in concept, are pretty cool for orthogonal things. Like for example, in Congo, there's a branching mission for the Catholic branch or like the Fetishist branch, and it makes sense because you can, for the most part, pick only one state religion, right? Of course, you can flip flop between over the course of the campaign, but it sort of makes sense that you pick one side. So I think that's like the motivation behind branching missions, I guess. But anyway, so there's some like changes that I don't think are worth talking about. They do seem to have more integration with the HRE. For example, seems like you can ask to join the HRE, and the Emperor can then decide whether, for example, one option seems to be that sure, Teutonic Order can join, but until they reform, they cannot attack another member of the Empire without calling in the Emperor, essentially. Apparently, they also leave the HRE. Now, it's unclear whether this effect will work properly and is properly tested, but if you treat it as face value, that's a pretty cool effect, I suppose. Okay. Honestly, I don't think this is a big deal. It's not that hard to join the Empire currently, so it's sort of a more scripted way, I suppose. Maybe it makes the AI more in tune to join the Empire or something like that. Okay, and basically, seems like you can do some Prussian mission path or the Crusader mission path. So that's, I guess, where the branching comes in. Okay, so here's like the Prussia case. Still, again, I really don't like how this is presented. Like, you can't see what's up ahead until you actually click this, right? Or you look at the wiki, or you read the game files, or you test it locally first. It's yeah, it's a bit problematic, I think. But anyway, so I don't think there are too many interesting parts in the Prussian side. I really think it's essentially what we currently have in Prussia. One cool effect is that you get to, where is it? Okay. Uh, hmm. I think it's towards the bottom. You get to steal an electorship, which is kind of a cool effect. And they later say that that's a generic thing. So if you're a member of the HRE, you can do stuff diplomatically to gain electorship. That's pretty cool. But anyway, I think like this part of the mission of the diary is like whatever. It's cool. Flavor and nothing that wows me, I guess. Nothing that will like really grab my heart. But this is the thing I was talking about. Apparently, there are ways to get the electorship for the Teutonic Order, and later they said in the next dev diary that they'll add it for the general case. So that's pretty cool. And honestly, I think there has been a trend where in EU4 they sort of add custom things to sort of enhance certain mechanics or certain religions. So in this case, the mechanic, so to speak, would be being able to claim the electorship through diplomatic means, or I guess through offensive means here. And they sort of got the audience feedback and they said, all right, let's make it generic. It's a cool thing to add for the general case instead of just for Teutonic Order. And I think that's a very great thing that they did. Unfortunately, I don't think they did that for many of the changes in the past. So the recent one I can think of is that there are three, I believe, three starting nations that can get the Buddha deity for Hindu. And having the Buddha deity, most importantly, unlocks a lot of monuments for Hindus. For the most part, you can essentially use the Buddhist specific monuments as a Hindu if you're using the Buddha deity. And that's pretty cool. Like, sure, it's a bit overtuned, blah blah blah. Hindu's already super strong, but it's pretty cool. But the problem with that is only three nations can do it. You can't even form any of the three nations. And so it sort of bugs me that they never thought, okay, let's make this whole getting Buddha deity thing generic. Let's make it like a generic concept where maybe if you have a lot of Buddhist dev, you can get the deity. There's some decision, there's some event, I don't know. But yeah, I'm glad they made that decision to make this effect not Teutonic specific and made it generic. And I hope they sort of revisit some prior mechanics that are like nation specific but can easily be generalized for the generic case and apply them. Okay. Well, anyway, as I said, nothing too much to say. I guess if you're really into the whole like militarization thing, I believe you can get militarization mechanic as a theocracy now for if that's cool for you. And yeah, I mean, you should read this, I suppose. One interesting highlight is this grant Orthodox autonomy. Okay. Well, you can read it. Basically, you accept Orthodox and Coptic. Well, you don't accept it, I suppose. You just don't get RU penalties from it. And this is another thing that they later made generic. Actually, not generic. They only added it for like Venice, Poland, and some other countries. I really think it should be generic though. Like, but anyway. Okay. Now let me move on to the Crusader Path. Okay, so it's a Catholic-oriented playthrough, and you're gonna conquer a lot east, essentially. Okay, so first you get like Cav stuff. Cool. Cav. LMFAO. And this is the thing. You get Holy Horde government reform. So it's a tier 1 theocracy. Okay. Empire rank can raise provinces. What the hell? Yeah, can raise provinces. Permanent CB against neighboring heathens and heretics. And other stuff, like missionaries or whatever. Wow. That's insane. I believe they say later that you can only raise non-Catholic provinces, which makes sense, and I think that's a pretty cool effect. Who knows if it's implemented properly, but now some downsides that I immediately see. Looks like you have to be Catholic, so you can't just get this reform and then flip out so you can dow the Catholics. So it looks like you do need to conquer the Catholics normally without supposedly being able to raise the provinces and without getting the CB. So you'd have to claim or imperialism or whatever. Okay. Um, but it doesn't seem to be tag locked, at least. So in theory, you'd be able to start as Teutonic, at least from what I can see, go through the relevant missions. Now, I don't know how long it takes to go through this mission, the so-called Crusader of the Steppes. That's over here. Like, it's unclear how long this takes. Usually missions aren't that hard to go through, but there could be like really annoying missions. Like maybe one of them requires Tech 10 or some arbitrary time gate, right? Like maybe it requires Age of Absolutism or some stupid thing like that. But like if this is rushable, then it's really powerful, I think. And I suppose this is like a very natural way to a one faith. Hordes have always been good at one faiths because one faith is partly just like world conquest with extra steps. Of course, you can do a one faith without conquering the world, but it's for the most part conquering the world. And raising reduces dev, meaning you get less missionary penalty from converting. And, well, you get missionaries, 2 missionaries, and you're a theocracy. Theocracies also get war score in later reforms, assuming they're compatible, like tier A and tier 7. Maybe it's compatible with Holy Horde. And if they are, even more reason, right? Like, they can conquer so much. Still not going to be like a speedrunning thing, unless we find a way to, like, bug out the reforms and get to tier 8 quickly, plus go through the reforms. If you can do that, maybe it becomes like a speedrun territory thing, but it's still pretty cool. Okay. And they also supposedly buffed Anglican and Protestant and Reformed, which I'll show. Those two I'll show later. And I guess for Anglican, they added some new effects. Okay. So you get mercantilism and money now instead of just mercantilism or just money. You get 3% crown land from the clergy. 1 stab, 10 legitimacy. Increase inno and reform progress gain. Hard to say, like, without knowing the numbers. Maybe it's like a 50% increase, I don't know. Random owned colony gains 100 population. I think that's a pretty cool effect, but it's not that powerful. Increase seller chance in RU. This might be useful, the RU increase. Increase the opinion of blah blah. 50 opinion is pretty nice. Land morale by 10%. Decrease shock damage by 10. Okay. So, again, I think Anglican's still a pretty mediocre, lackluster religion. But I suppose they're slightly better than what they previously were. Okay. Oh, sorry, it looks like there are numbers. I missed it. Inno gain by 50%, reform progress by 15%. That's pretty cool. RU by 10%. Okay. So, next up is Livonian Order. Again, they really like their branching mission trees. I think they're sort of really on the branching mission hype train. Like a mission tree branch. There's some sort of like tree theme going on here. Anyway, so first thing which I found was at least unique. I don't know how impactful this is. I don't think it's that impactful. Is that the clergy start with four privileges that somehow symbolize their decentralized nature. So instead of adding new tags, they said, let's add privileges. Okay, interesting. As a side note, it seems like they raised the privilege cap from 4 to 6. This is much needed because they've been adding more and more interesting privileges, and they're just, you know, you just can't have all the privileges. And even with 6, you still can't have all, but you still get more. And I think the idea of number of privileges is generally balanced for by the fact that having more privileges tend to increase estate influence. And on that note, I think estate influence is kind of wacky because when you have 100% estate influence, you get a ticking disaster for a particular estate taking over, essentially. But that thing only ticks when you're at peace, or, sorry, when you're at peace and the estate loyalty is below 50%. Now, usually when you have 100% estate influence, you probably have a ton of privileges, and that probably also means you have fairly high estate loyalty equilibrium, like maybe like 70%. So like you never get that disaster. Like it's just never a like source of concern. And I feel like that's something you ought to that's like a thing you have to balance, right? So, in my opinion, I'd like to see the number of estate privileges being uncapped, but they're actually the disaster for having estate at 100% influence is actually harsher. Like I think it should just tick up even like no matter what loyalty it is. And you shouldn't be able to stop it from ticking up by just declaring war. I think they made it too easy, I suppose. But it's very nice that they moved it from 4 to 6 or 4 to 720, I think. 6 factorial. Okay, but anyway, so you can supposedly remove these privileges by either paying money or they say 2 stab, but this event doesn't seem to cost 2 stab. Maybe clicking the decision removes 2 stab and then you get to choose or something like that. Yeah, I think it's cool flavor. I don't think it's that impactful to gameplay though, frankly. Okay, but anyway, now you have like the branching mission thingy, right? So there's like the Livonian Path and the Crusader Path. So intuitively, same idea. Crusader, you conquer the wrong religions. Livonian, you do non-conquering stuff. Okay, so Livonian Path. I don't think there's anything that interesting. There's like some colonization thing, blah blah blah. And one thing they point out is a rightful concern and just a general source of issue with how EU4 trade is set up. Um, yeah. Since New World trade can't get to the Baltic, well, it can. The Northeast America can't, but like other parts can get to Baltic by going west. Like you can go through Central Asia, Russia, and then to the Baltics. But yeah, like the northeastern stuff can't go to the Baltics. And generally the path is it goes to North Sea or Ivory Coast. Well, some of the north ones I don't think can go to Ivory, but basically it can't go to Baltic is my point. And they recognize that. They said, okay, to get around that, we'll give you trade power in the Lubeck node, and you don't even have to conquer it. And in fact, if you conquer it, supposedly this bonus goes down a bit. But honestly, let's say you don't have any trade power in Lubeck, except for this 50. Uh, that's not going to give you much. It might give you like let's say 10% trade power, and yeah, like what can you do with 10% trade power, right? You're better off just collecting in like the Northeast America node, like the Chesapeake Bay or whatever it's called. Like you're better off collecting there directly if that part of the region is really lucrative. It probably won't be, but you know. So I don't think this is that interesting. Maybe instead it could have been like reduced trade power penalty from collecting in a non-home node. Or maybe if that's too broken, it's just for collecting in that particular Chesapeake node or whatever. So I don't think they handled this part properly. Um, okay. So yeah, and then you can like form nations or whatever. And looks like some of their philosophy is that you can either conquer Teutonic or you can be friendly with Teutonic, and that's, I guess, another part of the branch. I'm not sure if it's a branch or just two alternate completion conditions of the missions, but supposedly you don't have to conquer Teutonic if you don't want to. Okay, and then yeah, and then you have a little reform the government thingy. It's pretty cool, but it feels a bit, I don't know. I mean, it's cool. I'm not gonna complain. So, what are the interesting things? First of all, I'm pretty sure these are all tier 1 theocracy reforms. It's not clear to me. Like, some literally say, like, elective monarchy, but, like, I'm not sure if that means monarchy and this is a tier 1, or it's just called elective monarchy and it's theocracy. Like, I'm pretty sure they're all theocracy, but I don't know. Here, the Livonian plutocracy, you might think it's a republic, but like there's no term duration number. So like I have a feeling this is all theocracy, but again, I'm not sure. So some highlights. I suppose people who like their like Prussia or whatever gets more ways to get militarization. Here's one, and here's the other one. All right, cool stuff. I don't know why they give local goods produced and not goods produced. I'm not even sure if local goods produced work at the national scope. I don't know. Maybe it does. Okay, and here's the other one. Where is it? Yeah, 15% CCR. So assuming this is a tier 1 theocracy reform, that again makes theocracies really powerful. Now, I'm not sure if this is something generic one can get. I'm guessing yes, because you could form Livonia, I believe. And hopefully you get all these missions. And in that case, you might be able to snap these reforms. So yeah, 15% CCR on a tier 1 reform. Pretty good. The highest is monarchy right now. You could do 10% from celestial, which is the EOC thing, and in tier 2 you can have D1, which would also give you 10%. If that's too annoying, like you have to, be Mughals and get EOC essentially. If that's too annoying, the standard way is like ICTA or Indian Sultanate, which gives you 5% for that click, and then D1 for 10%. That gives 15. But yeah, theocracy giving 15 makes it pretty darn competitive, and they get war score on the latter reforms too. So they're a really strong conquest oriented government type now, assuming this is nice and generic. Like if this is Livonia or Oni, or like it has weird triggers, then forget it. Okay. And then there's like the Crusader Path. This one's uh less underwhelming after seeing the Holy Horde because that show's bonkers. So um what's the reform you get? Yeah, Crusading Empire. This is what you get. You get CB and you get your favorite militarization mechanic. Apparently everyone likes it, and that's it. You know what I think is kind of cool for like an expansion focused empire though? Like what like this is like an expansion plus converting, right? That's the whole theme of these crusading governments. What if it gives like minus 20%, 25% governing cost in Catholic or right religion provinces? I think that's a pretty cool thing for them to add. Okay, anyway, then they talk about adding stuff to Protestant. So they added AE, War Exhaustion, Autonomy, nothing major. But apparently, you also get a modifier for 10 years that presumably is exactly the same as the bonuses. So, yeah, it's not clear to me whether you get it when you pick it or when you exit it, right? When you swap it out. I think it's when you swap it out, but I'm not sure. Like when I click production efficiency, do I get this 10% and this? Or do I get this when I like remove it? I think it's a subtle difference and not that important, but I it's not clear to me from reading this. And then from Reformed, you get like stuff. You can read it. 10%. Oh, I'll read it for you. You're welcome. You're welcome. 10% trade steering, 20% manpower recovery, and 10% dev cost. These are like the additional modifiers. I don't know what the things actually currently give. I think trade gives like 10% trade efficiency. War gives like 10% morale and naval morale. Stability, oh, I forgot. I think it gives like unrest. Does it give improved relations? I don't think it does, right? What does it give? I forgot. I know it gives unrest. Or I think it gives unrest. But anyway. And then, oh yeah, they show some national ideas. Okay, none of them are that interesting. Like, I looked through it. None of them, like, sparked any wows to me. That's not to say, like, all national ideas should spark wows. But they're just, like, the generic stuff. Random disciplines scattered. Random, like, not so important modifiers scattered around, and so on. Okay. Um, I think that's mostly all I have to talk about. Let me see. Oh yeah, I just want to say one more thing. For some reason, people think Reformed is like the worst of the Reformation religions. That's just not true, okay? Like, Reformed is better than Protestant in single player. Why is that? Because Reformed gives you tolerance of heretics. And during the Age of Reformation, you have to deal with a lot of heretic provinces. So, if you're going to choose two religions, Reformed or Protestant, neither of them give you anything particularly like impressive, right? Like Protestant is like a bunch of mediocre modifiers. Same with Reformed, like they're not particularly impactful. Then, you might as well choose the one with the tolerance of heretics. People say like, oh, the 15% improved relations will allow you to massively expand. No, it doesn't. It's only 15%. It's good to have, but that's it. Okay. And Anglican is also pretty bad. So Reformed is actually like a really solid Reformation religion. Like if you had to pick between one of the three, pick pick Reformed. Hussite, if you count that as better, of course, but Hussite is hard to convert to, I suppose. I think that's it.